What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video. Today, I'm doing a book review on The Tainted Cup, written by Robert Jackson Bennett. So without further ado, let's dig into it. So The Tainted Cup is easily the most recent book I've ever read, and what that means, just like the most on the ball, like from release date to me actually reading the book I've been. The closest is probably Murtagh. I got that on pre-order, and then I read that as soon as that came. But that was in November, so I guess that one. But this is the first one that was released in 2024 that I've actually read. So yeah, shout out to you guys in my comment section for that r/fantasy bingo book card video. You guys are awesome. And you guys suggested doing this one for my 2024 read. So here it is. So without giving away spoilers, kind of the synopsis for The Tainted Cup is that it follows our main character Din and kind of his boss, the inspector. Her name's Ana, or Anna. I'll call her Ana because it's A-N-A. And it's kind of a weird, funky world. It's Asian inspired. I would probably say Chinese inspired, where there's different cantos or different regions. But basically, it's like a murder mystery where Din, he has super special powers where his mind is literally chemically altered. Where he remembers everything he ever sees, smells, touches, like everything he experiences is locked up in his little cranium, and so that's like his superpower, or his magic ability, if you will. And it's pretty cool because it's kind of powered a little bit by like his sense of smell. So he has like literally a little satchel of vials that have different scents in them, so he can open a vial, take a sniff, and like, all right, I'm gonna have mint. This is the scent. I'm gonna have mint be the catalyst scent that is gonna help me when I smell that mint later. It's gonna help me recall all these memories, which is kind of cool because I've heard and I've seen studies where your sense of smell is your strongest sense for memory. Like sometimes I get a random whiff of like a perfume or a cologne, and it makes me think of like my grandfather from like years ago, even though he's been dead for a number of years. So like things like that, where it's like, so it's like cool. It's kind of rooted in fact, where it's like your sense of smell is very strong correlated with your memory. So that's kind of cool. But basically the synopsis, like I said, it's a murder mystery where Din and Ana are trying to solve these murders that are going on across the Empire. And the Empire is kind of on a coast of a continent, and then from the oceans off the coast there's these massive Leviathan monsters that every wet season or every spring, it seems like, that they come in, try to knock down the outer wall and just try to wreak havoc across the Empire. So this is kind of like a well-established empire once we get introduced to it. So it's like a flintlock fantasy, I guess I would say, where because they use cannons but they also use swords, and they have this weird magic stuff like with the memory, and like different people or different species or races are altered differently. I'm explaining that poorly, but so it's not quite flintlock fantasy, but they do use gunpowder. So there are guns and cannons and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of the synopsis of it without really spoiling too much. And I like just knowing as little about that as possible, like basically just knowing that, I was kind of excited about it. But the more I read, the more like disappointed I got, where it's like the world didn't really feel as fleshed out as I was hoping for. So the world building score, you'll see here in a minute, kind of takes a big hit for that. And a lot of the characters are just kind of whiny, and I don't really care for them. The only redeeming characters, in my opinion, are Din, the main character that you follow, and Ana, his boss, or the inspector. Because she's just so quirky, but also she seems so intelligent. But sometimes there's some scenes where she just like pulls things out of thin air. It's like, that doesn't make sense. Like, how did you get to that? Like, how did you get from point A to point B with knowing as little as we know? But then it's revealed that she knows more than we know. So whatever. But the story itself is told in the first person. It's told from Din's perspective. He's like the narrator telling us. So whatever perspective that is, I forget whether that's first, second, or third. So, but yeah, so it was a solid book. My overall score was a 6.14 out of 10. So not amazing, but I still did enjoy my time with it, because I always like to say anything over a 5 is something I dig or something I enjoy. and anything below a 5 I bury, and I really don't care for and really wouldn't recommend to read. So this one, I feel like if found the right audience, I think you would really love it. I don't think I'm the right audience, but I still enjoyed it a little bit. Like I said, like kind of the magic system where different people are altered differently, I think is pretty cool. And I like the idea of Leviathans trying to take out the human race, basically. And it's like the entire human existence is to just survive and fight back against the Leviathans. But then there's like class war going on where it's like just the general grunts are the ones that are fighting against Leviathans and just fighting for humanity's sake. And then it's kind of the people at the top that, of course, reap all the benefits of everything. So kind of classic class warfare, I guess you could say. But yeah, I think maybe Mr. Bennett was trying to establish way more than he maybe should have in the first book. I think he dropped a lot of cool elements, but they didn't really seem all that cohesive. I think if he would have maybe had one or two really big points, like the Leviathans as a threat, and then make that the focus instead of having the Leviathans threat on the background and that kind of making almost a timer to cause tension for the main characters. We got to solve these murders quickly, otherwise the entire humanity could be at risk to these Leviathans. It's like you already know they're at risk from the Leviathans no matter what. So it's like solving this one murder, is that really gonna like save humanity? Like, so I think the stakes were kind of skewed. Sometimes they seemed really high stakes. Other times it's like, it doesn't matter no matter what Din does. It's like, whatever happens, happens, you know? So it's like, the stakes I feel like were kind of all over the place. And I think that really negatively affected my experience with the book, personally. So that's really all I'm going to say. Overall, like I said, I did enjoy it. There are a lot of cool elements. But I don't think I'm going to pick up the second and third book immediately. Maybe I'll wait for more people to read them as they come out and see if they tend to get better in people's opinion. And if they do, maybe I'll finish the series, because I think it's a plan to be a trilogy, but I'm not sure. But I didn't love it, so take that with what you will. But yeah, now moving on forward, if you want spoilers, if you've read this book, well, we can talk spoilers. Or if you don't care about spoilers because you're some madman, let's go dig into spoilers. So if you haven't watched any of my reviews before, then the way I get my overall score of the 6.14 is that I have 5 categories I like to rate, and then I just take the average of those 5 to get my overall of 6.14. So my first category I like to rate is emotional impact, and I rated emotional impact as a 6 out of 10. And for me, emotional impact is as low as it is because, like I said in my non-spoiler section, is that I feel like the stakes for the Tainted Cup are kind of all over the place. In some scenes, they seem very high stakes, and it seems like Din is like in peril if he were to get caught for what he's doing, where he like broke into that one secretary's lady's house, and then found what he found there, and then tried to hide it. Like that whole scenario, like that seemed high stakes, like anybody could catch him at any moment. But then later, when it's like they keep threatening, oh, it's the wet season soon, the Leviathans are coming, it's like, okay, so who's the real antagonist here? Is it this murderer they're trying to hunt down, or is this just this backdrop of the omnipresent threat to humanity, you know? So that kind of took me out of it a little bit, where it's like, if the Leviathans are coming anyway, and that's really the focus for everybody, that they should take the Leviathans out, then it's like, if Din really finds this murderer, what does that really change? So that took it out of it for me a little bit. And when, like, as the hunt for this murderer was going on, and it turned out, oh, it could be 3 murderers. They've done it differently. And then just the reveals for me were kind of more and more unsatisfying. And it's like, every time Din put some things together, and then he was kind of using his, not common sense, but his investigational juices, then it's like Ana, his boss, is like one step ahead of him. It's like, she's like, I already figured that out. You didn't figure that out yet? It's like, how did you figure that out with what little information you were given? But then it turns out, she actually knows all this other. So it's like, that kind of took me out of it a little bit. So yeah, emotional impact, 6 out of 10. Next category I like to rate is characters. Now characters I rated a little higher. I think this is actually the highest thing out of the 5. And I rated that as a 6.7. And that's because Din and Ana, they're my two most favorite characters in the book. The rest of them are kind of flat, in my opinion. They're kind of like just stereotype, archetypal characters, just standard. Where it's like there's, in my opinion, it's like kind of gloss over them without having, and without Bennett like describing the people, like after they get reintroduced to different scenes, I would forget who they were. Where it's like if he just said the name, I'm like, I don't remember who this is. But then he's like, oh yeah, he's wearing the purple cloak or whatever. I'm like, okay, it's that guy, cool. And that got even worse when it was turned out a bunch of the people on the investigation team were kind of compromised because they were at a party that involved some people that are suspects. So like once that broke up and it was basically just Ana and Din that were on the investigation team, and then one other old guy, I forget his name. Like we hardly see the rest of that crew again. So it's like a lot of the characters that get introduced, they get pulled away immediately. So it's like the cast of characters is big, but it's just because there's a lot of like B and C characters, where it's like the A characters are really Ana and Din, and from there. So again, I really liked Ana, really liked Din. Maybe Ana was like a little too eccentric for me at times, but it worked out. Like they had a really great banter back and forth, and really kind of see that relationship grow throughout the book as well. Because at the beginning of the book, they've only been together, like as a working relationship for like 4 months, I think. And then throughout the story, there's another like month and a half, 2 months that occur, I believe. And it's like during that time, you can kind of see the relationship grow and they trust each other more and more. And you can kind of understand more why Ana is so eccentric at times. You can really, and since we're in Din's head, because he's just explaining the story, we can understand where he's coming from and like what makes sense for him and things like that. So that's why characters for me is as high as it is at a 6.7, even though a lot of the other characters I think fall flat and are just there, almost as set pieces, where it's like really the drivers of the plot and the people that I care about are Din and Ana. So, and then speaking of the plot, that's the third category I like to rate. I rated that as a 5.5 out of 10. This is the lowest thing I rated. Like I said, like I keep saying, it's like the stakes for me are all over the place. So it's like the plot itself is kind of all over the place because I don't really know what the threat is. Is the threat the Leviathans that it's like that ticking time bomb against? Or is it this murderer that they're trying to chase down? So it's like I felt like the stakes were all over the place. So it's like I wasn't really invested that much in the plot. And then as things occurred and as we saw little details happen, and then they get recalled later, and then Din starts putting things together, like that was interesting. And that's again why the emotional impact is slightly higher than this 5.5 for plot. But it's like sometimes it didn't really feel like it moved the plot forward. Sometimes it felt like it was just set dressing and trying to explain the world a little bit more, which again I understand, and maybe I should give it a little bit of grace because it is the first book in a series trying to explain the world, trying to explain the magic stuff, trying to explain Leviathans and history and all this stuff. But I think the plot suffered because of it. Sometimes that's why the first book in a series sometimes for me is sometimes my least favorite, just because the story itself sometimes suffers because of what the author is trying to prop up for the rest of the series. So usually that means I really like the world building overall, but this world building, again, it kind of was a little incohesive, where I think a lot of fantasy and sci-fi too struggles with, where things are just named, like, for example, like some of the augments for the magic stuff that people get, like, makes one of them like basically extend people's limbs, and make them stronger and longer. So you get like 10 feet people, but they're called cacklers because when they move, their bones cackle, I guess, or crackle, which is like that's kind of weird. But it's like, so there's some cool things like that, but it's like then it's just like, oh, the cracklers or the cacklers, I forget what they're actually called. It's like, so just like these words get thrown up, and it's like, I don't know, like if you were in the world it would make sense, but just like as a reader, kind of like peering into the world, it just felt a little incohesive for myself. So anyway, plot 5.5. Fourth category is dialogue and prose. Now dialogue and prose I rated as a 6 out of 10. Now this one I honestly really struggled with where I wanted to score this. Because there were some scenes where, like I said, the banter between Din and Ana really worked, and I actually got some good chuckles out of it. Other times I had really hard eye rolls. And sometimes, I know I've said this before in other reviews too, but like sometimes it seemed like Ana was just swear for the sake of swearing. And it's like sometimes, like at the beginning it was like very shocking, like, okay, wow, like she's very serious. But then as it just kept happening, it's like, okay, just that's her personality trait to just drop F-bombs. It kind of, in my opinion, deflated some of those scenes a little bit where it could have been a bigger bite if she didn't swear as much. But again, I get a lot of people swear in their personal life, and it's just is what it is. So maybe that's a little harsh. But then there were other scenes where Din is in like in the jungle, and they're hunting like with a pathogen crew where they're basically wearing like containment suits, and so because the murderer is using pathogen or spores or whatever, or a contagion to kill their victims, and so they think they're on the murderer's trail, or the suspect's trail, and so they're in these pathogen suits. But at this scene, there's like a creepy area, or in Din's mind, it's creepy. But he's describing these flowers and how they're unsettling to him. But the way they're described makes it seem like it's a very pretty, like, flower garden. And in my head, I'm like, flowers are nice and fun and flattering and like they're pretty. And he's like, oh, it's so unsettling because of all these different colors. But it's like for me right here now in Michigan, it's like it's spring, moving in that summertime. There's flowers everywhere. It's amazing. So many bright colors. It's like so, and it's like it lifts my spirits up, and it's for me it's nice and appealing to look at, and it makes me happy and excited. But Din, when he's describing a similar scene, he's saying, "Oh, it's grotesque and but it's like, but he's saying it's bright, fun, colorful flowers." So it's like what he said and the emotion that he has behind it doesn't really match up. So that's part of the reason I had trouble rating dialogue and prose higher than a 6. Just because it's like, so this is like the prime example that was in my head, but I'm sure there was one or two other scenes where it's like what's being described doesn't match what's in Din's head. Like what he's describing, it's like the emotion behind it. For me, that for me there was some disconnect there, which I didn't. For me, it didn't make sense. So, dialogue and prose is a solid 6. Now, world building is a 6.5 out of 10. This is the last category I like to rate. Now, world building, as I was going through this book after the first 100 pages, I expected it to be the highest rated thing, just because these cool Leviathan creatures during the wet season come out of the ocean and try to come onto land and just wreak havoc on the human population. So like that element alone is really cool. Some of the cool magic things where Din, he like had special training and then he took these augments, so now he has this very sharp memory, and then like I said before, he can like sniff these different scents to help recall those memories. And then like the cacklers, there's, I forget a lot of the other names, but there's some people like the Axiom, I think, who are like very intelligent and like are the one that actually like researches new augments to help like with human strength and like reproduction, and so all these different things. So there's all these different elements that are really cool, and like I said, it's like sort of like a flintlock fantasy a little bit, where they use gunpowder, or at least they use cannons. They don't explicitly say it's gunpowder. They use flares and cannons against these Leviathans and things like that. So that was really cool. But as it went and progressed, then there were just more and more like details, like extra details about different things that were added. For me, that kind of took away from what I thought were the really cool things I wanted to explore more. But it was kind of more the politics of the Hansa clan or the Hansa family and how they relate to the emperor, and how, where it's like really we're in like the outskirts of the emperor or the empire. So it's like some of the politics stuff, it's kind of degraded, but it's like we're in depth about how all these politics work on the inner city, where it's like we're not in the inner city, so why do I care about this right now? I didn't. So that's why world building for me suffered a little bit more. And then another thing is I didn't realize until like 3/4 of the way through this book that this setting was kind of like Asian inspired, like inspired by like China and mostly China, from my understanding. And I didn't realize that. And like my only indication, sort of, was like his straw hat and like just how like the cone straw hat, but that's not really mentioned until like 3/4 through the story, and then I'm like looking, and then I was kind of like looking up for some of the inspiration stuff and like saying it's Asia inspired, and like I had no idea. Some of the way that architecture was described, I was just thinking it was standard European with a jungle. Like European historical fiction is usually like when I think of fantasy, it's kind of that like historical European inspired stuff. So once I found that out, I thought that was cool. But again, that kind of took me out of it because I had a completely different vision for the world in my head. But then as things get described more and more, like it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't until like 3/4 through the book where I like had to rewire everything I learned about the book, at least for the setting and how things looked, just because of like the lack of detail, or maybe when the detail was introduced, maybe I glazed over stuff. Maybe that's on me, and that's fair. But again, like when the fact that I had to do that really brought that world building down quite a bit for me. So, but yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts on the Tainted Cup. Again, I didn't really have high expectations, so I'm not really too bummed out, but I was hoping it was going to be better. Like, I still enjoyed my time with it. I think there were still some cool elements in it, like the augments and things like that, like I said, and like the whole idea of the Leviathans coming. I think those are really cool things. But I think having a murder mystery in that world maybe wasn't the right story to tell, at least not for my interests, for what the world really is. So, yeah, take that with what you will. But let me know in the comments. Have you guys read the book? Have you enjoyed the book? Am I on base? Like, does the things I say make sense? Or am I completely off base? Let me know. And also, if you're still watching, thank you at this point. But if you guys have any books, if you can sort of see back here, that you want me to read and review, please let me know in the comments down below. Or hit me up on Twitter or X now. I'd be more than happy to try to catch up on a lot of stuff. So don't get it. If you do give me a recommendation, it takes me a long time to get to it. Don't feel bad. I have an endless TBR, it feels like, that I'm trying to get through. So anyway, that's it for me today, guys. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like down below. If you guys want to see more from me, Diggerdan, please hit that subscribe button as well as that bell notification icon so you guys know when I upload each and every single time. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.